For years, Darth Vader believed he stood at Palpatine's right hand. He crushed rebellions. He hunted Jedi. He built fear into the very bones of the galaxy. And in return, he expected loyalty, respect, a place of true power beside his master. But the Inquisitors changed everything. It started on Nur. Vader arrived unannounced, as he always did, expecting obedience. Instead, he found something else. Encrypted orders, hidden mission logs, a chain of command that ran past him, straight to Palpatine himself. The Inquisitors weren't just hunters, they were watchers, reporting on Vader, feeding the Emperor information he never shared, keeping Vader leashed. That was Palpatine's first mistake. Vader didn't ask questions, he didn't demand explanations, he ignited his blade, and the fortress on Nur ran red. One by one, the Inquisitors fell, the Grand Inquisitor, the Second Sister, the Fifth Brother. None of them were ready for this. None of them had ever truly faced Vader, not like this. Not as a predator with nothing left to prove. When it was over, Vader stood alone in the silence. No anger, no hesitation, just clarity. Palpatine had built a cage around him, and he had never even noticed. Every mission, every target, every survivor the Inquisitors had quietly allowed to live. It had all been control, a game only the Emperor was playing. But now, the board had changed. Vader crushed the last encrypted data core beneath his boot and reached out through the Force. There was something else out there, something Palpatine had kept buried, even from him. A planet, hidden, fortress deep in the unknown regions. And Vader was already moving toward it. The unknown regions had no mercy for the unprepared. Hyperspace lanes fractured out here. Stars moved in patterns that defied standard navigation. Most Imperial captains refused the assignment entirely. But Vader wasn't most captains. And the Devastator cut through the dark like a blade, following coordinates that should not have existed. Coordinates pulled from a dead Inquisitor's encrypted drive. A single word had been attached to the file. No mission title, no Imperial clearance code, just Exegol. Vader had never heard it spoken aloud, not once. In all his years beside Palpatine, through every war council, every dark side lesson, every quiet moment in the Emperor's tower on Coruscant, that name had never passed his master's lips. That alone told him everything. The approach to Exegol was like descending into a wound in the galaxy. Lightning storms swallowed the upper atmosphere. Navigation systems flickered and failed. Even the Force felt different here, heavy, ancient, like something vast and patient had been breathing in this place for a very long time. Vader guided the ship through manually. His pilots were terrified. He didn't care. And then the clouds broke. Below him sat a fleet. Not a patrol group, not a hidden outpost. A fleet unlike anything the Empire had constructed above ground. Star destroyers, but larger, modified, bristling with weapons that carried no Imperial designation. Thousands of them, moored in the dark beneath Exegol's scarred surface, waiting in perfect silence. Vader stood at the bridge viewport for a long moment. "My lord," his captain whispered beside him. "What is this place?" Vader didn't answer, because the answer was already forming in his mind. Cold and precise as a vibroblade, this was Palpatine's insurance policy. If the Empire ever fell, if the rebellion ever won, if Vader himself ever turned, this was waiting. A second empire, a hidden throne, a fleet that answered to no one but the Emperor and the cult that served him. The Sith Eternal, fanatics who had spent decades building this in secret, worshipping Palpatine not as a politician, but as a god. And not one of them had ever told Vader it existed. He descended to the surface alone. The Sith Eternal cultists saw him coming and scrambled for weapons. It didn't help them. Vader moved through their outer defenses like smoke through a doorway. Unstoppable, methodical, absolute. By the time he reached the central command chamber, the senior Sith Eternal officers were already on their knees. He stood over them in the red-lit dark. "You will show me everything," he said quietly. "Every ship, every weapon, every order Palpatine ever gave you." A beat of silence. "And then, you will have a new master." Back on Coruscant, Palpatine's eyes opened in the dark. He had felt it, all of it. And for the first time in decades, the Emperor felt something close to fear. Power doesn't announce itself, it simply arrives. And on Exegol, in a throne room carved from ancient stone, deep beneath a lightning-torn sky, Darth Vader sat down, not in deference, not in ceremony. He sat because the seat was his now, and he wanted Palpatine to feel the moment it happened. Through the Force, he made sure his master felt every second of it. The Sith Eternal hadn't resisted for long. Their loyalty to Palpatine ran deep. Years of devotion, ritual, and dark side conditioning. But Vader had something the Emperor could never offer them in person. Presence. Raw, overwhelming, undeniable presence. He stood in front of them without a speech, without a promise. Just the weight of the dark side radiating off him like heat from a dying star. One by one, they bent the knee. The fleet commanders, the cloning engineers, the Sith cultists who had spent their entire lives in the shadows of Exegol. All of them. Because survival has always been a more powerful instinct than faith, Vader wasted no time. He ordered the fleet activated. Crews were assembled. Power systems, dormant for years, roared back to life across thousands of ships. The sound of it echoed up through the rock and into the storm above. Exegol, for the first time, felt awake. Then he opened a channel to Coruscant. He didn't dress it up. Vader never did. The transmission was short, direct, and deliberately calm, which somehow made it worse. "You built a second empire behind my back," Vader said. "A fleet, a cult, a contingency. You planned for every outcome, except this one." A pause, long enough to let the silence land. "I am no longer your apprentice. I am no longer your weapon. Exegol belongs to me now, and when I come for you, I will not be coming alone." He closed the channel before Palpatine could respond. On Coruscant, the Emperor sat perfectly still in the dark of his tower. His advisors were panicking. His Imperial intelligence officers were already scrambling, trying to confirm what their sensors were telling them. Thousands of ships, fully crewed, moving into formation above the unknown regions. Palpatine raised one hand slowly and silenced the room. He had trained Vader for exactly this kind of ruthlessness. He had sharpened him into the most dangerous being in the galaxy. He had always known that one day this moment might come. He had prepared for it. What he had not prepared for was how quickly Vader had moved. The Emperor's eyes narrowed in the dark. "Clever boy," he whispered. And then he began to plan the counterstrike that would bring Vader to his knees, or destroy the galaxy trying. Palpatine moved within the hour. That was the thing people always forgot about the Emperor. Behind the robes, behind the stillness, behind those cold and patient eyes, lived a man who had outmaneuvered an entire galaxy for decades. He didn't panic. He didn't rage. He simply acted. 3 Imperial Star Destroyer battle groups were redirected immediately. No Senate to consult. No council to slow him down. Just a quiet order delivered through encrypted channels, and 200 warships changing course in the dark. Their target was Exegol. Their orders were simple: leave nothing standing. Vader had expected it. He had studied Palpatine's military doctrine for 20 years, sat beside him during war councils, read every strategic brief, watched the Emperor dismantle enemy fleets with cold precision. He knew exactly how his master would respond to a direct threat. Speed, overwhelming force, no warning. So Vader had prepared accordingly. When the Imperial battle groups dropped out of hyperspace above Exegol, they found something waiting for them. Not a planet caught off guard. Not a half-organized defense scrambling into position. A wall of Sith Eternal Star Destroyers, already formed up, already locked on, already moving forward. The battle was short, and it was devastating. The Sith Eternal fleet outgunned everything Palpatine had sent. These ships had been built in secret over decades, engineered without budget limits, without political compromise, without any concern except raw destructive power. The Imperial battle groups fought hard, but hard wasn't enough. One by one, the Imperial destroyers broke formation. Some retreated, some were destroyed entirely. A handful of captains, faced with total annihilation, turned their ships around and broadcast a message back to Coruscant. The Emperor's fleet has been repelled. Exegol holds. Those 4 words spread through Imperial channels like a virus. Officers talked. Crew members whispered. Within 48 hours, the story had leaked far beyond military channels. The Emperor had sent a fleet against Darth Vader, and Darth Vader had won. Across the Empire, the question no one had ever dared ask out loud was suddenly everywhere. What happens if Vader is stronger? On Exegol, Vader stood at the Fleet Command Center and watched the last Imperial ship vanish into hyperspace. No celebration, no satisfaction, just the next calculation forming behind his mask. Palpatine would not send ships again. Not like that. He would change tactics. Go quiet, go subtle. He would use agents, assassins. He would try to turn Vader's own commanders against him. Vader had already anticipated that too. He turned to his new fleet admiral, a senior Sith Eternal officer who had bent the knee quickly and proven his value faster. Double the internal security, Vader said, and prepare the advance fleet. We are not waiting for the next attack. He stepped back toward the viewport. The storm above Exegol churned endlessly. We are going to Coruscant. And somewhere in the galaxy, in a hidden base far from Imperial reach, the rebellion intercepted the battle report and realized, with creeping dread, that the Empire's civil war had only just begun. The rebellion had one rule above all others. Pick your battles carefully, because unlike the Empire, they couldn't afford to lose twice. But right now, in the war room of the Alliance's hidden fleet, somewhere deep in the Outer Rim, that rule felt impossible to follow, because the battle reports coming in weren't just alarming, they were rewriting everything. Mon Mothma stood at the center of the holotable, her face unreadable, her hands completely still. Around her, rebel generals, fleet commanders, intelligence officers, all of them talking at once. The Empire's civil war had lit up every comm channel in the galaxy. Vader, Exegol, a hidden fleet, a direct challenge to Palpatine himself. She let them talk for exactly 60 seconds. Then she raised one hand, and the room went quiet. "We do not move," she said. "Not yet. We let them destroy each other." Across the table, Han Solo leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "With respect," he said, and his tone made clear he had very little. "That hidden fleet Vader just took. Those aren't just ships. That's enough firepower to end this war. Whichever side wins, they point that fleet at us next." Nobody argued, because nobody could. Luke hadn't spoken yet. He stood slightly apart from the others, the way he often did when the Force was trying to tell him something. His eyes were distant, not distracted, listening. What he was feeling made no logical sense. Through the Force, he could feel Vader, not as a threat, not as the faceless terror that had haunted the galaxy for 2 decades. Something else. Something buried so deep beneath the armor and the anger and the dark side. Conflict. Real conflict. The kind that didn't come from strategy or ambition. The kind that only came from a person, not a weapon, being pulled in 2 directions at once. Luke had felt it before, on Bespin. Right before Vader said the words that had shattered his entire understanding of who he was, he closed his eyes. "He's not just fighting Palpatine," Luke said quietly. The room shifted. Everyone turned. "Luke," Leia started. "Something is happening to him," Luke continued. "Something we can't see from out here. If we wait for one side to win, it'll be too late, for all of us." Mon Mothma studied him carefully. She had learned, slowly, reluctantly, that when Luke Skywalker said he felt something in the Force, it was worth listening to, even when it was inconvenient, even when it made no tactical sense whatsoever. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. Luke looked up. "I'm suggesting we don't wait for the war to end," he said. "I'm suggesting we find Vader before Palpatine does." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room, and on Exegol, as if he had heard every word, Vader paused mid-stride and looked up at nothing. Feeling through the Force, a presence he hadn't sensed in years, his son, was coming. Luke had imagined this meeting 100 different ways. He had rehearsed words in the dark of his bunk. He had meditated on it for hours, reaching through the Force, trying to feel the shape of his father underneath all that armor and anger. He had told himself he was ready. He wasn't ready. Getting to Exegol had nearly killed him twice. The navigation alone had pushed his X-Wing to its absolute limit. The storm systems in the upper atmosphere had torn at the hull like something alive. And when he finally landed, in a scorched hangar bay surrounded by Sith Eternal soldiers with weapons raised, he had done the only thing that made sense. He surrendered, calmly, completely, because he hadn't come to fight his way in. He had come to talk. They brought him to the throne room without a word. Vader was already there, standing at the viewport, not seated, standing, as if he had been waiting, but didn't want to look like it. The red light of Exegol's eternal storms painted the room in long, shifting shadows. Luke walked forward until he stopped a few meters away. He didn't reach for his lightsaber. He kept his hands open and his breathing steady. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You came alone," Vader said finally. Not a question, an observation, and somewhere underneath the filtered breath and the mechanical voice, something that almost sounded like surprise. "Yes," Luke said. "That was either very brave," Vader said, "or very foolish. My friends would say both." Another silence. Heavier this time. Then Vader turned from the viewport, fully, facing his son directly, the way he rarely faced anyone. not as a superior dismissing someone beneath him, as something else entirely. "I felt you coming," Vader said. "Through the Force. Days ago." "I know," Luke replied. "I felt you feel it." That landed. Even through the mask, Luke could sense it landing. Vader moved slowly to the center of the room. His cape settled around him like a storm finding stillness. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more deliberate. "Palpatine is finished," he said. "His fleet is broken. His throne is already hollow. Within weeks, there will be nothing left of what he built except ashes and fear." He paused. "But what comes after him? That is not yet decided." Luke held his ground, waiting. "Rule with me," Vader said. And for the first time, in all the years, all the battles, all the pain between them, it didn't sound like a command. It didn't sound like a trap. It sounded like a father, asking his son for something he didn't know how to ask for any other way. Not as emperor and apprentice, as equals. "You and I, together, could rebuild this galaxy into something neither Palpatine nor the rebellion ever imagined." He took one step closer. "Or you refuse, and watch two armies tear what's left of it apart." Luke looked at his father for a long, quiet moment. And in the Force, he felt it again. That buried thing, that deep, aching conflict that had drawn him here in the first place. It was still there, underneath everything. Anakin Skywalker was still in there, but the galaxy was burning. And Luke had seconds, not years, to decide. He closed his eyes and made his choice. Coruscant had seen empires rise before. It had watched republics burn and dictators crown themselves in marble halls. It had absorbed every tremor of galactic history, every coup, every war, every moment of collapse, and simply kept turning, city over city, layer over layer, the planet that forgot nothing and mourned even less. But it had never seen anything like this. The Sith Eternal Fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Coruscant at dawn. Not one ship, not a battle group, thousands. They filled the upper atmosphere like a second sky, dark and vast and completely, terrifyingly silent. No warning shot, no ultimatum broadcast on public channels. Vader didn't negotiate with cities. Imperial defenses scrambled immediately. Loyal Star Destroyers moved into formation. Surface cannons charged across the cityscape. For approximately 4 minutes, it looked like a fight was coming. Then the Imperial fleet commanders saw the numbers. One by one, they stood down. Palpatine was waiting in the throne room. Of course he was. He had dismissed his guards, sent away his advisors. He sat alone in the dark at the top of his tower, as if he had known, from the moment Vader's transmission ended weeks ago, that it would finish here, in this room, between the two of them, the way it was always going to. Vader walked in without ceremony. Luke, who had come to Coruscant at his father's side, still carrying the fragile hope that Anakin Skywalker was somewhere in that armor, stopped at the threshold, watching. Palpatine didn't stand. He looked at Vader the way a man looks at a storm. He seated himself, with something caught between pride and fury. "You were always my greatest work," the Emperor said quietly. "Then you should have treated me as more than a tool," Vader replied. What happened next lasted less than a minute. Palpatine unleashed everything. Force lightning that cracked the walls, that shook the tower to its foundations, that lit the room in blinding white. It was the full, unrestrained power of a man who had ruled the dark side for half a century. Vader walked through it, not without pain. The armor scorched, systems failed, every step cost him something. But he kept walking, slow and absolute, until his hand closed around his master's throat. The lightning stopped. The room went dark. Palpatine was gone. Luke had expected to feel relief. Instead, standing in the doorway of that throne room, looking at his father silhouetted against Coruscant's glowing skyline, he felt something cold settle in his chest. Because within hours, the galaxy's reaction made everything clear. The rebellion had framed this fight as freedom versus tyranny, good versus evil. But the beings of the galaxy didn't celebrate. They didn't rise up. They looked at the new fleet above their heads, and they simply waited, traded one fear for another. Vader's empire moved fast, faster than Palpatine ever had. Systems fell into line not through negotiation, but through the sheer, overwhelming certainty that resistance was pointless. There was no cruelty for its own sake, no random brutality, just order. Cold, total, suffocating order. And somehow, that was worse. In a hidden rebel base, half evacuated, half in chaos, Mon Mothma stared at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. She had spent years telling her people that defeating the Emperor would change everything. "We were wrong," she said to no one in particular. Across the city, in a quiet room high above Coruscant's endless lights, Luke Skywalker sat alone, eyes closed, reaching through the Force toward his father. He could still feel Anakin in there, distant, buried deep, but the galaxy couldn't wait for buried things to surface. Someone had to act, and Luke was running out of time to decide how. There is a moment in every war when strategy runs out, when the maps stop making sense, when the numbers stop adding up, when every logical path forward leads somewhere worse than where you started. Most commanders, when they hit that moment, fall back, regroup, buy time. Luke Skywalker walked straight through it. He went to his father alone, again. No rebel escort, no backup plan, no lightsaber at his hip this time. He had left it behind deliberately. Because where he was going, a weapon would only tell the wrong story. He found Vader in the Imperial Palace war room, surrounded by fleet commanders, star charts, and the quiet machinery of total galactic control. The Empire was running smoothly, efficiently, the kind of order that looked almost reasonable, until you looked closely at what it was costing the people underneath it. Vader dismissed the room the moment Luke walked in. They stood across from each other in the silence. "You've come to try again," Vader said, flat, tired, almost resigned. "I've come to finish it," Luke replied. What Luke said next, he had never said to anyone, not to Leia, not to Han, not even to Obi-Wan's memory. In the quiet of his meditation, he talked about Tatooine, about Owen and Beru, about growing up under twin suns, dreaming of something bigger, not knowing why the pull was so strong, only that it was there. He talked about the moment on Bespin, not the fight, not the fall, the second just before, when he had looked into Vader's face and felt something come back through the Force that he hadn't expected. Recognition. He talked about what it felt like to be a son who grew up without a father, and then found out his father was the most feared man in the galaxy. "I didn't stop loving you," Luke said quietly, "even then, and I don't know if that makes me strong or just foolish." The room was completely still. Vader hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but through the Force, Luke felt it happening, that buried thing, deeper now than it had been on Exegol, but still there, beginning to shift, to surface. "Anakin," Luke said, soft, direct, like it cost him something real to say it. "The galaxy doesn't need another emperor. It needs to breathe again." A long, long silence. Then, Vader's hand, slowly, almost without intention, moved to the control panel on his chest armor. Not to a weapon, not to a comm system, to the environmental seals. Luke went completely still. "Father, I remember Tatooine," Vader said, so quietly it was almost lost beneath the sound of the ventilation systems. "I remember the suns." His breathing changed, labored, real. "I remember who I was before all of this." What happened in the hours that followed would take years for historians to fully piece together. What they knew, what the galaxy woke up to, was this. The Sith Eternal Fleet stood down, not destroyed, not defeated in battle, stood down. Fleet commanders across the Empire received a single encrypted order from the highest clearance level in the Imperial system. Cease all offensive operations. Await further instruction. And on the steps of the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, in full view of every newsfeed and rebel interceptor and frightened citizen watching from 1,000 city levels below, Luke Skywalker walked out into the light. He wasn't alone. Beside him, a tall figure in black armor moved slowly, deliberately, each step clearly costing something, but moving forward nonetheless. The galaxy watched in silence. It didn't fix everything, not even close. The rebellion still had hard choices ahead. The systems Vader had seized didn't simply release overnight. The Sith Eternal Fleet was a weapon that needed dismantling, carefully, slowly, over years. There were officers who refused the stand-down order, warlords who saw the power vacuum and moved immediately to fill it. The road back was going to be long, and painful, and deeply uncertain, but for the first time in a very long time, it existed. Luke stood at the palace viewport that night, Coruscant's endless lights burning below him like a second galaxy, and breathed. Behind him, he heard the slow, mechanical rhythm of his father's breathing. Still there, still steady. "What happens now?" Vader asked. Luke looked out at the city, at the galaxy beyond it, at everything that needed rebuilding, and healing, and time. "Now," he said simply, "we do the hard part." And somewhere, in the Force, in the space between stars, in the quiet place where lost things sometimes find their way home, a presence that had been dark for a very long time began slowly to feel something like peace.